BBC recently did a radio documentary in which they exposed that the Great Flood at Lynmouth in 1952, when they had 250 times the rainfall, and it created this massive wave of water that came through the village, killing 35 people, was actually done by the RAF. They called it Operation Cumulus, also Operation Witch Doctor, and it was manipulated on purpose as an experiment on weather manipulation. It's been going on that long and earlier. Here is a US Air Force document, 1996. It describes the artificial creation of floods, hurricanes, droughts and earthquakes, and continues. Weather modification will become a part of domestic and international security and could be done unilaterally. It could have offensive and defensive applications and even be used for deterrence purposes. The ability to generate precipitation, fog, storms on Earth, to modify space weather, and the production of artificial weather all are part of an integrated set of military technologies. Now, of course, most people will now be bloody aware, my God, were we bombarded this year or what, with chemtrails, not contrails which disappear, condensation trails, chemtrails that don't disappear if they come out the back of these bloody aircraft. They stay around and they come out and eventually drop to the earth, and they have strontium, they have aluminium, they have barium. It's acidifying water, it's acidifying the land, and it is causing tremendous impacts on human health, cumulatively, again, the coal. But it's doing something else. In the HAARP patents and specifications, etc., in the description of a researcher describing and summarizing what it said this: dispersed metallic particles such as aluminium, barium and strontium, the main chemical ingredients of chemtrails, or ingredients of chemtrails, may increase the atmosphere's conductivity and therefore enhance HAARP's weather modification performance. So it's doing that as well. So where am I going with this? Well, I'm going here. Dr. Richard Day, 1969, the weather will be modified and used as a weapon of war to create drought or famine. A weapon of war against who? In Agenda 21 terms, a weapon of war against the small farmers, landowners and growers of the world, not least in America. We have had in America this massive drought this year, which has devastated small independent farmers and growers. In 2011 and other times, we've had these extraordinary forests of tornadoes. It was about 300 in a period of 3 days at one point. I think it was 2011. And that, of course, is devastating rural communities and what have you. Creating tornadoes with HAARP technology, child's bloody play. And what have we had in this country? Devastating weather and floods, which again has had a massive impact upon small farmers and growers. And you know, there was a report for the European Parliament, a European Parliament committee in the 1990s, about HAARP, which was actually quite good because it was saying, hold on a minute, we don't like this. And one of the things it was saying is that HAARP technology had the ability to manipulate the jet stream and change weather patterns. Well, when you look at the meteorological explanation for the great deluge in Britain this summer, they say extraordinary things happen to the jet stream. And instead of going away and taking, dropping some and going off into Europe, it basically started doing this, which is why we got the bloody lot.
I wouldn't expect to see a large push from inside this administration. It would raise an enormous amount of controversy.
What about government organizations that deal specifically with weather? While attending a severe weather seminar put together by a Chicago television station, the director of the National Weather Service admits weather modification research has taken place, but denies present-day operation.
It's a rare opportunity to ask the director of the National Weather Service some questions. Louis had agreed to come if we allowed some questions. Do you have questions for Louis? And if so, please stand up. And Louis, you can recognize
There was a hand way up in the back.
Yes, I had a question. With the high-resolution satellite image you're able to look at the National Weather Service, is there any way you could detect whether a weather modification experiment is taking place or cloud seeding? I know in Kansas and Northern California that takes place, and as well as Idaho. Is there any way you can see that in the satellite? And is there a way to communicate that to the public, or do meteorologists have a duty to tell the public about weather modification?
Yeah. So I'm not aware of any cloud seeding that was going on for this. I can tell you that in the 70s there was a Project Storm Fury that people started experimenting with seeding hurricanes way out into the Atlantic. And at that point, there were two things that happened. First of all, they had a small sample size, so they couldn't really determine anything with any kind of statistical significance of whether they were having an impact or not. For those scientists so the second thing that happened was for those scientists who claimed they were having an impact, the areas that were subsequently impacted by those storms were ready to sue those scientists. That experiment was ended. So I know there's weather modification that's done under very controlled circumstances, especially out in the West, for water resource purposes. In the East, there was some work that was done in Pennsylvania, and again, if people were claiming that they were successfully deriving more rainfall out of a system for the western part of the state, the farmers in the eastern part of the state said that was rainfall that would have fallen over us. Yeah. And then they started having that kind of battle within the state, and that ended. So it's a very tricky, controversial area, but in real time, we know of no one that was out there doing any kind of seeding.
My question is, I've looked at what they call HAMP, or the Hurricane Modification Program that Homeland Security has talked about, and I know there are actually electric companies like the PG&E, Pacific Gas and Electric Company in Northern California that conducts cloud seeding experiments. As a meteorologist, if you can see that on the radar, is it possible to maybe let the public know, oh, there's cloud seeding here in the area, just to be cautious?
Let's put it this way. Cloud seeding now is done more by private sector, and they don't tell you when they're doing it because they consider it proprietary.
Okay.
So we do not factor in that type of activity into either our analysis or forecasting. We're just not even made aware of when it's happening. And it's mostly now focused in the western part of the U.S. for water resources.
Right.
But no, it doesn't play a role in our forecast process.
And then I've looked at what they've called geoengineering or climate engineering, literally modifying the weather to prevent climate change. Do you think that's something that is going to be done on a research basis, or if it's done, it has to be stringent?
I really don't. First of all, again, if people doing that research, I'm not really aware of it, so I'm not even sure I can answer the question. I know that there are people who continue to talk about, they'll propose, like the nuclear, like Tom mentioned, let's set off nuclear explosions and we can destroy a hurricane.
Right. Yeah, I've heard they talked about wanting to do like volcanic eruptions.
Or send missiles and send tornadoes.
Sent tornadoes. So what would you like? An exploding tornado? Just make things worse.
So we don't really. It's not enough.
Yeah, the modifications I think are more. And this is not my center of expertise, but long-term modifications of environments by planting trees and changing slow modification of ecosystems in a responsible manner sometimes may over time
don't cut down the forest in South Africa.
They take in carbon dioxide.
But you're talking about vast energy scales, so to make significant impacts on them.
Right. Because I know there is conducted cloud seeding experiments taking place. Do you think that's more private corporations that are doing it for research purposes?
I think cloud seeding, I'm not that familiar, but I don't know of any government programs dealing in that.
Okay.
It's pretty much, that was...
Project Storm Fury way back.
Yeah. Oh, there's nothing like that, that's for sure.
Is the director of the National Weather Service oblivious to the current day weather modification programs taking place? Or is he covering up a program that the public should not know about?
That was the director of the National Weather Service and the director of the Storm Prediction Center, both using a 1970s example of weather modification gone wrong, and then denying current knowledge of weather modification activities. Now, the ironic thing is that he says, the director of the National Weather Service says, that it's proprietary information. They're not made aware of what the companies are doing when they're out there spraying. Okay? Well, unfortunately, that's not accurate. Here's the NOAA weather modification form that must be filled out and submitted and approved before weather modification activities take place. Must be filled out by state, local, corporate authorities, has to be approved, and the results have to be reported. Okay, here's the form, corporate services, noaa.gov. You guys can click on it yourself. It'll open up a PDF. Here it is. It's for real. There's a form that must be filled out. Now that's just one step of this. We have the director of the National Weather Service also saying that weather modification is not effective. He says that when he's answering the question from the reporter that we sent, my viewers sent, Julio. We sent him all across the country to different weather modification conferences, forums, to record these things. And we have that documented in my must-see list here. And I'll put links down below for this so you guys can go check this out yourself. But each one of these conferences here, half-hour long, and you can listen to the NOAA and Idaho Power cloud seeding results presented by themselves. The same people that are saying that they don't know where they're doing it, here's their 2012 results from Idaho. Augmentation of snowpack for Idaho Power using silver iodide, spraying silver iodide. Okay? So why deny it? Well, we've got Michio Kaku, and I'll put a link down below to this as well. You guys can click on this here. It'll take you to a video just a few weeks ago. Michio Kaku on ABC News, confirming weather modification and giving possible uses such as sporting events, weddings. Really? Well, that's what they say. And they're talking about doing it using frequency, not using spray. They're figuring out there's other ways to generate cloud condensation nuclei, the precursor to rain, without having to spray something like silver iodide. However, we go back over here to the documentary we put out, and according to the director of the National Weather Service, they're oblivious to the fact that this is going on. They don't know. So, guys, I am just really kind of shocked at this point that we have professionals that deny to our faces what's going on, but yet there's forms that must be filled out beforehand and approved by them in order to do it. We have 1970s examples being given when we have current examples. We have companies in operation, Weather Modification Incorporated, West Texas Weather Modification Association. We went to their conference. They presented their results. They're partnered up with NOAA. MIT, How to Halt Hurricanes. North Dakota, cloud seeding weather modification projects. The laws. All the different companies doing it. Idaho Power, everything I just told you about. Here's their results. Okay, the American Society for Civil Engineers, standard practice for the design and operation of hail suppression. This is something that is being done globally, being done nationally, approved by the National Weather Service and NOAA, and yet they're going to stand up there and play dumb. And notice, go back and watch the clip again. Notice how many times they look down at Julio's credentials. He's wearing them on his chest right next to his camera. And they immediately went into spin mode as soon as they saw his credentials. It's obvious. And I'll put this whole link down below so you guys can go through here. It might take you a couple weeks if you really want to sit down and go through each one of these, read everything. By the time you're done, you're going to be where I'm at. You're going to be trying to explain to people why this isn't such a good idea. Resonance technology is where they're eventually going with this. Right now, we're still worried about spray. We're still worried about different particulates being used. But they're moving away from that and going to much more powerful systems that are capable of generating large areas of energy in the atmosphere and ionosphere.
Weather Modification Association corporate roster, all the companies involved, and as you will notice right here, NASIC, DECA, U.S. Air Force, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. That is right. The U.S. Air Force is a corporate member of the Weather Modification Association. This article has been written for 2 years. Texas Weather Modification Association, here's all their links, videos about it. Other, AQS, Mateo Systems, we'll get to that in a second. World Meteorological Organization expert team on weather modification. You want to talk to somebody about weather modification, call one of these people. Very, very real. And by the way, Rolf is from NCAR. So on to the next article, climate engineering patents. Don't want to bore you, just going to kind of skip over it. Waiting for my website. There it is. Starting back in 1891, moving all the way up to present with things like cloud seeding carbon dioxide bullets, and all kinds of crazy stuff in here. Cloud seeding apparatuses, rainmakers, you name it. There's some really interesting ones in here. Don't want to bore you with all the details, but check it out if you're really interested in who's behind the technology. And then on down here to geoengineering patents, and what you're going to notice is a bunch of CDR ones and water alteration stuff. Very, very boring. Moving along, this one's fun. Cloud seeding. This one's called The History of Cloud Seeding from Pluviculture to Hurricane Hacking. Back in 1850-ish, a guy named James Pollard Epstein, the Storm King, proposed burning forests to cloud seed. Oh, yeah. This guy, General Dryhance IV, he got money from Congress back in 1890 and went to Texas and the Sea Ranch in Andrews County, Texas, and began shooting at the sky with rockets and cannons and balloons. Oh, my. It did not rain, and he was later dubbed General Dryhance IV, and his money was taken away. Ohio rain wizard Frank Melbourne. Good information on that. And CW Post, the Post cereal guy, he also was a rainmaker. Read up on it. Charles Mallory Hadfield, the moisture accelerator, made it rain in San Diego. Rained so bad that it destroyed everything. Millions and millions of dollars of damage. The city said they would pay this Native American Indian to make it rain. They would pay him $10,000. He made it rain, and the 1916 flooding of Lake Morena is epic. The birth of cloud seeding, 1946, Vincent Schaefer, Irving Langmuir. I oversimplify this here. Irving Langmuir theorized that the introduction of dry ice and iodide into a sufficiently moist cloud of low temperature could induce precipitation. Vincent Schaefer breathed into a freezer filled with dry ice. Ice formed. The birth of cloud seeding. It's a joke. You got to read it. Anyway, current methods of cloud seeding. This section is broken into two parts, ground-based and air-based. Ground-based seeding works like this. You got a silver iodide generator. It's on top of a mountain, near the bottom of a mountain. This is called orographic seeding, and it basically goes up in the winds that hit this side of the mountain. They pull it up into the air, and it comes down on top of the mountains. That is called snowpack augmentation. You can see that in a video on my YouTube channel where there they are. That's what they look like. This video is from 1981. Get down. Wait for it. A presentation of the Department of the Interior. Oh, yeah. Big government, big government. Bureau of Reclamation. It's cut off. You can't see it at the bottom, but that is the U.S. Bureau of the Interior and U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, land reclamation. Anyway, so this is what one looks like up close. Here's another one. Yep. And here's an even big, neater one. This is a multi-flare distributor. These are all over our mountaintops. All of the Rockies have been seeded for well over 30 years. All of them.
In the end, I've come to find out that several forms of modification are taking place. From the genetic modification of our food supply to the engineering of Earth's climate, both presented as solutions to fight climate change. Both may lead us into a situation we can't come back from.
It's kind of a wild time to be alive, guys. If you don't speak up against it, it's going to keep on happening. And it's going to get worse and worse and worse. It'll become a weapon, if it already isn't. Much love, guys. Be safe.